Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Yeah, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Wednesday, May 5th, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well today. Well, it's been a very, very busy day, and I'm also preparing for an interview to do on Thursday. We'll talk a little bit about that during today's show. So if you have been following what's going on in the news, following the backlash around the 1619 Project and the backlash of trying to teach a more correct history in schools and a more correct history dealing with the history of slavery in this country, you've been paying attention to what's going on. You've been following our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. You know, I've been posting different articles about this, and we've been talking about some of this for the past few months. Then there's also the attack on what's called critical race theory. The attack on critical race theory. And critical race theory is a legal analysis on the premise that race is a social construct that is used to oppress people of color rather than a natural biological feature. Okay, this is critical race theory. So you may have heard these different buzzwords, and we hear about continued attacks on the 1619 Project, which was spearheaded by journalist Nicole Hannah Jones. This ties into the rebuttal speech on Wednesday, April 28th, that Senator Tim Scott, Black Tea Party Republican of South Carolina, gave in response to President Joe Biden's address to a joint session of Congress. And we know that Senator Tim Scott said that America is not a racist country, but what he went on to say after that was the most important thing, and I talked about this on our show yesterday. He went on to say that it's backwards to fight discrimination with different types of discrimination, and it's wrong to try to use our painful past to dishonestly shut down debates in the present. So that was on Wednesday, April 28th. We know Thursday, April 29th, we know that there were two lawsuits filed, one in Wisconsin and one in Texas, on behalf of white farmers who were claiming that they were being discriminated against by the U.S. Department of Agriculture because they're not able to take advantage of the $5 billion in resources going to African-American farmers. That's in the $1.9 African-American farmers and farmers of color in the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. That was only voted for by Democrats and independents. No Republicans voted for it. Imagine that. Then on Friday, April 30th, you had Senator Mitch McConnell, former majority leader, now minority leader, Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, who sent a letter along with about 36 fellow Republicans to the new Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, and they're demanding that the 1619 Project not be eligible for federal grant money. The 1619 Project has become a hot button issue to conservatives across America, and politicians have fought efforts by school districts to make it part of history curriculums in public school districts. The 1619 Project, launched by the New York Times in 2019, reframes American history around the dates of August 1619, when the first slave ship comes into, is the English pirate ship, the White Lion, and the treasurer. They come into Point Comfort in Virginia. Now, we know African people were in this country for tens of thousands of years before that. The 1619 doesn't deal with that information. Dr. David Imhotep deals with that in The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. 1619 project does talk about 1526, when the Spanish are taking Africans into South Carolina in 1526. It does talk about that. Now, so the 1619 project was launched by Nikole Hannah Jones and the New York Times. It reframes American history around the dates of August 1619, and it has launched a fierce debate over the legacy that slavery has played in shaping America and American history, particularly as it relates to its treatment of African Americans. So you have this debate going on. You have what some people will call culture wars. And this ties into what Tim Scott said, because there's a whole backstory behind what Senator Tim Scott said. And keep in mind, as I said before, Senator Tim Scott was delivering the GOP rebuttal to Joe Biden's speech. That wasn't the Tim Scott rebuttal. That's the GOP rebuttal. Because that's how the GOP thinks. That's how the Republican Party thinks. The majority of them are saying systemic racism does not exist. The majority of them are saying systemic racism does not exist. And then when you try to put policies in place to address systemic racism, then they say things like it's backwards to fight discrimination with different types of discrimination. That's attacking the $5 billion in resources going to African American farmers. So you have Mitch McConnell, who, along with 3 dozen other Republicans, send a letter to the new Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, demanding that the 1619 project not be eligible for federal grant money. If we look at this article here from CNN.com, I also have one from New York Times. McConnell sends letter to Education Secretary demanding removal of the 1619 project from federal grant programs. If we look at this quickly here before the break, it says Republicans have misleadingly suggested there are widespread efforts to install the program, the 1619 project, in schools across the country. Former President Donald Trump made it a rallying cry during the 2020 election, while some states like California have used the 1619 project as part of their learning plan. The federal government has not directly instructed or promoted schools to use it, as it does not play a role in specific curriculum planning in local schools. Those decisions are largely made at the state level. Once again, the federal government has not directly instructed or promoted schools to use the 1619 project, as the federal government, the U.S. Department of Education, does not play a role in specific curriculum planning in local schools. Those decisions are largely made at the state level. However, the Education Department under the Biden administration has proposed offering grant programs to states and local schools that would incentivize them to use tools like the 1619 project in their classrooms. The Biden administration has proposed offering grant programs to states and local schools that would incentivize them to use tools like the 1619 project in their schools. Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, is calling on the Education Secretary, Miguel Cardona, to abandon the idea. Now, we're going to deal with this on the other side of the break, because this also ties into critical race theory. This also ties into how Americans are woefully ignorant of history, especially Republicans. We see we see in Tennessee. Many of you all saw the video. It's gone somewhat viral. Okay. In Tennessee, you have State Representative Lafferty. Okay. And people are laughing at State Representative Lafferty. But State Representative Lafferty is totally misstating what the Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787 was. And he said this in the state legislature. Okay. We have a clip coming up dealing with that. And these are lawmakers who don't understand history. These are lawmakers who are pushing a lot of these culture wars and don't want schools teaching about systemic racism, don't want schools teaching more accurately about history. They're attacking critical race theory, and there's no effort to make critical race theory, to push critical race theory in schools. Okay? So we're going to talk about this. Then former Georgia State Representative Vernon Jones got exposed on Dr. Marc Lamont Hill's show on the Black News Channel, because Vernon Jones is running for governor of Georgia, and he said the first thing he's going to do, one of the first things he's going to do if he wins, he's not going to win, he's not going to be Stacey Abrams, but he said one of the first things he's going to do is sign an executive order banning critical race theory. But the problem is, when asked numerous times by Dr. Marc Lamont Hill, Vernon Jones couldn't define what critical race theory was. We're going to deal with this on the other side of the break. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Gain knowledge in minutes from insightful summaries of progressive and socially conscious books. Blacklisted gives you access to curated content that'll satisfy your curiosity to learn and understand different perspectives. Empower yourself through inspirational and actionable ideas. It's easy to read or listen to on the go. Blacklisted. Empower yourself. Start your free trial today.
We all know the cannabis industry is headed toward an uprise in the past decade. What happens when there is a brand that brings this uprise in a blow? The cannabis industry welcomes her uprise. Hustle her hemp. Delivering excellence with pride is her watchword, and how you choose to embrace it makes it a priority. From cultivating rich cannabis into exquisite and tastefully finished CBD products to delivery, Hustle Her Hemp leaves no stone unturned. Hustle Her Hemp's mission is to empower women of color by building business and creating legacies, uniting beauty, health, and business. We are a pure definition of how we want the CBD industry to become in the future. While we are redefining innovation, we bring the same energy to improving the quality of life. Hustle Her Hemp is the new uprise.
Hi, I'm Joel Wilson, President and CEO of JCW Computer Consulting LLC, a technology implementation firm with over 20 years of satisfying customers. We offer a full spectrum of industry top-tier branded services. We are an authorized partner or reseller for Lenovo, Zoom, T-Mobile, Microsoft 365 and Surface tablets, Google Workspace, Acer, Asus, Samsung, PCmatic security software, and many more. Our online store features laptops, Chromebooks, computers, printers, accessories, and software. Businesses, take advantage of our free 1-hour Zoom tech consultation and know we offer top nationwide high-speed internet service providers, voice over IP, and cellular phone services. Home users, don't miss our current in-stock Chromebook inventory. Please visit us at jcwcc.com or call 215-879-6701.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, Superstation of Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Wednesday, May 5th, 2021, and we are live. If you have a quick question or comment, the call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. So right before the break, we were talking about all this that's going on, the attacks on the 1619 Project, culture wars, attacks on critical race theory. This ties into the rebuttal speech that Senator Tim Scott delivered on Wednesday, April 28th, to Joe Biden's speech to a joint session of Congress. This has to do with many Republicans saying systemic racism doesn't exist. They don't want to teach about the history of slavery in schools. You have some of them. There was one article. Then in the Tennessee state legislature, you have State Representative Lafferty, who is drastically misstating what the 3/5 compromise of 1787 is as well. State Representative Justin Lafferty. Okay, so we're going to talk about this on today's show. Now, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, May 6th, I'll be interviewing Dr. Darrell Scott, history professor at Howard University. And he's a former past president of ASALH, Association for the Study of African American Life and History. He teaches a class at Howard University dealing with from slavery to mass incarceration. But he has been putting information out, and I talked to him we had dinner along with historian Jamon Jordan here in Detroit, I think it's about 2 years ago now. He's been putting information out debunking the myth that mass incarceration is related to the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, debunking the myth that mass incarceration is related to the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. All right. And in doing my research, he's correct. And I really came to realize this when I was doing research in 2016 on a presentation dealing with the history of the war on drugs. And mass incarceration really begins in the early 1970s, starting with Richard Nixon's war on drugs. He declared June 17th, 1971. So through all my analysis and going through a chronology of history, the question I kept coming up with time after time after time is if the 13th Amendment was passed to re-enslave African Americans and create mass incarceration and all this, like you see in the documentary 13 from Ava DuVernay, if that was the case, why did it take 106 years for mass incarceration to take place? If the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was created to re-enslave African Americans and create this mass incarceration and things like this, the premise of the documentary 13 from Ava DuVernay, if that was the case, why did it take 106 years from 1865 to 1971 for mass incarceration to take place? It's because they're not related. That's why. We're going to deal with this in the interview that I'm going to do Thursday, May 6th, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Dr. Darrell Scott, who will be on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. You don't want to miss that. We'll share some excerpts of that interview here on the African History Network show on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. Okay, so on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. If you'd like this type of information, also, you can support the African History Network, $, TheAHNShow through Cash App, $, TheAHNShow through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, paypal.me/TheAHNShow. When you do it through Cash App, be sure to type in $TheAHNShow, SHOW. It'll show my name. It'll say Michael and have a picture of me. And you can still register for the online course that I teach on Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is a 9-week, 18-hour online course. We do it online live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. It's Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next class is Saturday, May 8th. This is class number 2. As soon as you register, you can watch class number 1. And I did this course in February and March. You can go watch all 10 of those sessions as well. Okay. So the class is regularly $130 on sale, $80. You can watch from around the world. All right, I want to go back to pick up where we left off before the break. So we were talking about these attacks dealing with history, and these attacks coming from Republicans trying to suppress teaching about the history of slavery, teaching about critical race theory, teaching about systemic racism, different things like this, okay? Senator Mitch McConnell on Friday, April 30th, sent a letter to the new Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, and he asked Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona to abandon curriculum in American schools that Senator Mitch McConnell argues tells a revisionist history of America's founding, tells a revisionist history of America's founding. Now, McConnell claims these programs, such as the New York Times 1619 Project, reorient the view of American history, quote, away from their intended purposes toward a politicized and divisive agenda, away from their intended purposes toward a politicized and divisive agenda. Okay. Now, the 1619 Project has become a hot button issue for conservatives across America, and politicians have fought efforts by school districts to make it part of history curriculum in public school districts. Now, there's some flaws in the 1619 Project. I've talked about that before. It's better than some of the other things that are being taught in schools. When I do my interview with Dr. Darrell Scott, who's a history professor, he's a historian, he's a history professor at Howard University. He's been critical of the 1619 Project. That's the second thing that we're going to talk about as well. We'll talk about the 13th Amendment and how it did not lead to mass incarceration. Okay. And we'll also talk about the 1619 Project as well. Now, even though there's some flaws in the 1619 Project, I wouldn't say throw it away. I would just say, correct the flaws in it. You may not use all of it. This is something that I recommend that teachers use. You can use these. You can use this at home with your children as well. This is the study from the Southern Poverty Law Center, Teaching Hard History American Slavery, Teaching Hard History American Slavery. It's a 52-page study that documents how the history of slavery is being incorrectly taught in schools all across the country. It makes numerous recommendations to more correctly teach the history of slavery. And the advisory board is chaired by Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries. Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries is associate professor of American history at Ohio State University, and he has a specialization in African American history. I've interviewed him here before on the African History Network show, and he's also a nephew of one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries is a bad historian. Okay, so you can go to splcenter.org, Southern Poverty Law Center, splcenter.org, and search for Teaching Hard History American Slavery. Teaching Hard History American Slavery. All right. Okay, so now there was an article from the New York Times. We're going to go to clip one here, Shakita. Nikole Hannah Jones was interviewed on Roland Martin Unfiltered on May 3rd to respond to these attacks. Okay, so we're going to go to that clip in just a second here. There's a big article also from the New York Times dealing with this, because these are the types of things that I follow on a daily basis. All this ties into history. McConnell attacks Biden rules anti-racism focus, calling it divisive. See, this is one of the things you have to watch. These buzzwords, divisive. Okay, they talk about it being divisive. They talk about systemic racism doesn't exist. They talk about revisionist history. You have Republicans, many of them pushing the big lie of the 2020 election, talking about revisionist history. Okay, some of them back the 1776 project that Donald Trump commissioned that has been thoroughly debunked. Luckily, Joe Biden took that 1776 report off of whitehouse.gov and disbanded the 1776 commission. The minority leader, Senator Mitch McConnell, joined Republicans in protesting a proposal to promote teaching about systemic racism and the consequences of slavery, saying it would indoctrinate students with a slanted story. Wait a second. Now, see, you've got to understand the speech that Senator Tim Scott delivered. I can't stress this enough. That's how most Republicans think. That was the GOP rebuttal. That's how most Republicans think. Most of them don't want to talk about systemic racism. Most of them don't want to teach about systemic racism in school. Because if you do, you're going to let the cat out the bag. We can't let people figure out how wealth, power, and resources were maldistributed into the hands of white people. We can't let them figure this out. The minority leader joined Republicans in protesting a proposal to promote teaching about systemic racism and the consequences of slavery. The consequences of slavery, saying it would indoctrinate. This is another key word that you're going to hear. Indoctrination. Okay? They're trying to indoctrinate our students. Okay, so we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this one here. But read this article from the New York Times. I want to go to clip 1 here. This is from Roland Martin and filtered from, this was May 3rd, 2021. Revisionist history. McConnell says 1619 project should be removed. Let's go to this clip, Shakita. Okay, take it off mute.
Nicole Hannah Jones, of course, the creator of the 1619 Project, in right here, because all of this dovetails us perfectly what she's been dealing with in response. Of course, all these people being so upset. I mean, these white folks are really bothering themselves of the 1619 Project, because I keep telling y'all, white folks in this country are so fragile. They can't handle history, but they can only believe his story. Okay, they can't handle anything else. That's why you have now Senator Mitch McConnell trying to attack her and telling the Department of Education, don't you dare include the 1619 Project in any federal grant programs in this country. Nicole, we were talking about, of course, the comments made by Senator Tim Scott. And then even right there, when you heard him on Face the Nation trying to say, well, the reason we had the Pickford decision was because money was being taken away from black farmers to white farmers, and now we're trying to reverse that. No, Tim. We're trying to still deal with the inequities from the Pickford decision, because even that wasn't enough. And you would think a black man from South Carolina could understand that. But no, instead, he's simply tap dancing on the dance card of the Republican Party.
Well, I think that Representative or Senator Scott does. I think he does get it. He certainly understands, coming from his roots, that Pickford was about redress for discrimination. But this is something that it's a tool we've seen the Republican Party use really since the end of the Civil Rights Movement, when you could no longer legally discriminate against Black Americans. The tactic then became to claim that redress for discrimination is equivalent to discrimination. That if you actually are trying to undo the harms of discrimination, that is just as bad as discrimination. And you've seen the Supreme Court make similar rulings, for instance, in Parents Involved, where it said, programs to try to help desegregate schools were just as bad as programs that segregated schools. So I don't believe that he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's sticking within the talking points of the Republican Party. And it sounds, I was just going to say that the reason it's effective is, of course, it framed that way does sound unfair. Well, why should white farmers not be able to get something that black farmers get? But the truth is, we know if you steal something from me, you having to pay me back is not unfair to my neighbors who aren't getting any money, right? That's not how it works, but it sounds like it sounds good. And that's why they say it
but this was the precise game played when you had the Republicans like Ward Connolly, who led their anti-affirmative action memorandums. So they would draft language where you would go, well, of course not. I wouldn't want somebody to be discriminated against because of their race. So therefore, I'm going to support this without realizing. In fact, I'm from Houston, and the late Mayor Bob Lanier, what he did was he made them change the language on the ballot to reflect what it would actually lead to. and they were mad as hell. That's why he got defeated in Houston, because he said, no. That language not going to fly, because we're going to put the actual intent down. And so you're right. Senator Tim Scott knows exactly what he's doing. And so he wants to sit here and provide the cover because he's running for re-election. And so he wants, he wants to get reelected. He needs to play up to these white Republicans in South Carolina in order for him to win the primary, because he knows if he gets out of the primary, he's going to win in the general. And so he needs to be called out. But this is also why, and again, John Dickerson, fine, you're a nice journalist, but you're grossly unprepared for that question, because, as Michael said, the comeback should have easily been. So if you have to level the playing field, that means it's uneven. Senator, how did it get uneven? Now you got to force him to say, so why are you having to provide funding to HBCUs? What exactly happened where they are grossly underfunded? Senator, please tell me what's the endowment of the largest HBCU in the country, and does it even come close to the top 100 largely white institutions in America? He can't answer that question. Now all of a sudden he's stuck.
Yeah, I mean, this is why you see so much opposition to the 1619 Project. It's because when we talk about issues of racial inequality, whether it be economic inequality, whether it be inequality in education, inequality in the criminal justice system, inequality in the treatment of Black farmers, if we can just pretend that today is today and we have no past, nothing created this, there's no long history and legacy of legalized discrimination, then we can use that rhetoric of equality without actually having to do anything to address the inequality. So if you actually have to grapple with the past and all of the institutions that really conspire to keep Black people in the lower caste, then you are charged with having to do something to rectify the current inequality. So we have to kind of exist in this space where the only thing that matters about our past are the good things, and all of the bad things about our past are relevant to the society we live in today.
That's why I played it. That's why I've been laughing, because all of these folks on Fox News and conservative media, they've been going on and on and on. Oh, critical race theory, and there's no systemic racism in America, and they're going on and on and on. And you're sitting there going, so y'all just want to act like all these facts just don't exist, so it just so happened that Black people proliferate the criminal justice system. That thing just happened. That's just on y'all. Y'all were just born criminal, and that's why. Oh, the health disparities. Oh no, please, racism in medicine had nothing to do with that. In fact, that's going to be our next conversation. How this white doctor treated a brother who went to the hospital. She's like, hey, yeah, you want some narcotics, huh? I mean, Nicole, the reason Black people initially were not addicted to opioids because white doctors would not prescribe opioids because they said, yeah, they just here trying to get a high. And guess what? They ended up hooking white folks on opioids.
Yes, absolutely. It's the one time where being discriminated against has actually saved our lives for a brief period of time. So, of course, that's not the case anymore, and Black people are now also being ravaged by.
Pause it right there. Now African Americans are being ravaged by the opioid addiction also. We're going to go to clip 2, okay? Started at the 8-minute, 14-second mark, Shakita. So in this article that I had up from news1.com, name of this article is Critical Race Truth. Republicans keep trying to revise America's racist history. Okay. And it talks about Tennessee State Representative Justin Lafferty. Okay. We're going to go to that. We're going to go to that story next. But in the article is a tweet from April 30th from Nicole Hannah Jones. And once again, you've heard me. I've been critical of the 1619 Project, but this is better than, some of the other stuff that's out there. I think, you can correct some of the things that are wrong with it. I wouldn't trash it. But I want to look at this tweet that she posted here because I follow her on Twitter also. This is from April 30th. This is in response to the attacks from Republicans and the letter that Mitch McConnell sent to Miguel Cardona on Friday, April 30th. No one is pushing laws mandating the teaching of the 1619 Project. No one is pushing laws mandating the teaching of the 1619 Project. But Republicans across the U.S. are pushing laws to mandate patriotic education and to prohibit the teaching of the 1619 Project and about nation's racist past, about the racist past of this nation. If you're not reporting it that way, you're failing. This is what she tweeted. Okay, so see, this ties into Tim stating the position of the Republican National Committee that America is not a racist country, because they don't even want to deal with the origins of this country. They don't even want to deal with historical systemic racism. They'll acknowledge slavery existed, but they don't want to talk about systemic racism, because if they start talking about systemic racism and they say systemic racism doesn't exist, then you have to ask the question, well, when did it go out of existence? When did it end? How did it end? You start asking questions, they can't answer these questions. Just like Vernon Jones couldn't answer the question what critical race theory was, but he says he wants to ban critical race theory. He wants to do an executive order to ban critical race theory if he became governor of Georgia. It was not going to happen. Stacey Abrams is going to whip his behind. I hope she does. Okay. So all this is taking place at the same time, and you have to understand history to understand what's going on, understand these attacks. Now look at what's taking place all at the same time. 361 bills are being pushed through 47 state legislatures, being pushed by Republicans, to these voter restriction bills, okay, to restrict who can vote, to reduce the turnout of African Americans and Hispanics, etc. You have this taking place. You have many Republicans still pushing the big lie that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. Okay, you have that. You have that being pushed. So they're trying to control who gets in office in the future, and politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Politics impacts every aspect of our lives, from the water we drink to the air we breathe to the food we eat. So they're trying to restrict our ability to be able to elect people into office who will pass policies that are beneficial to us. At the same time, they want to restrict what is taught in school, dealing with the past, dealing with history, to then influence the trajectory of the future by reducing what children know about the history of slavery, what children know about systemic racism. So they're trying to control the trajectory of the future by reducing who can vote and put policies into law, and then trying to restrict the history that's being taught, and don't want the real history of slavery to be taught. Don't want to teach about systemic racism. They're trying to box us in from both sides. So we have to be very strategic and understand what's taking place. Now, I want to go to clip 2 here of that segment, because Nicole Hannah Jones said these are culture wars. Roland said, no, these are not culture wars. Let's go to clip 2, Shakita.
It's very simple. Stock market, jobs report, major bills being passed, highly popular with American people, President Joe Biden's approval ratings high. What they need, they desperately need white conservative evangelicals and non-college educated white people to be so enraged with wokeness, cancel culture, critical race theory, 1619 Project, black farmers getting $5 billion, then they trot out Senator Tim Scott. What they need is they have got white people. They're coming after our way of life. That's why I'm dropping a book next year called White Fear. That's all this is about. And so we got to understand not to get caught in their game.
Here's a huge government scam.
Okay. So pause it right there. We're going to go to clip 3, Shakita. So all these things we've been talking about here on this show, African-American farmers, the $5 billion allocated to African-American farmers and farmers of color in the $1.9 trillion America Rescue Plan that no Republicans voted for. The fact that African-American farmers in 2020 from the Trump administration got 0.1% of $26 billion. They got $20.8 million out of $26 billion. That's not me. That's the that's the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, who said that March 25th, 2021, in an interview with the Washington Post. All this is taking place at the same time, and this is the result of elections. This is dealing with politics. And we have to understand racism as a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism has nothing to do with not liking people. Racism has nothing to do with calling people racial epithets. And this is what we were talking about on the Tammy Mack Late Show, Dr. Umar Johnson and myself. And this is something that something that Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson didn't understand. Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson is saying racism doesn't exist, white supremacy doesn't exist, and we're lying and all this stuff. No, he's just crazy. He's just crazy. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race that comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy for the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. Very quickly here, we're going to go to clip number 3. We're going to go to Tennessee. Not Arrested Development, Tennessee. Okay, I know Speech from Arrested Development. I've interviewed him before. But not that Tennessee. Well, he was talking about Tennessee, but we're not talking about Arrested Development, okay? Tennessee state legislature, right? Justin Lafferty, he's on the state legislature floor. He has no understanding of the 3/5 Compromise of 1787. You look at this article here from the Washington Post. GOP state lawmakers, the 3/5 Compromise was actually good. 3/5 Compromise of 1787, which dealt with apportionment and taxation. So you're going to count 3/5 of the slave population of slaveholding states. And this gave an unfair advantage, a dominance to southern states in the House of Representatives, as well as the Electoral College, because they're both related. They both tie to population. In the course of arguing against teaching about systemic racism, see, there's that word again, these buzzwords: indoctrination, systemic racism, revisionist history, critical race theory. In the course of arguing against teaching about systemic racism in schools, some GOP lawmakers suggested the original constitutional sin was somehow anti-slavery. Let's go to clip 3, Shakita, from All In with Chris Hayes.
They get to set the agenda because they've lost the White House and the Senate and the House. Their agenda is just to oppose everything President Biden wants. But in the states, they do get to write the laws. They've been focusing on restricting voting, in a lot of those, banning health care for transgender youth and trans participation in sports. And now, the latest project they're working on is banning critical race theory in schools. Critical race theory, the study of the structural roots of American racial hierarchy and its legacy. Several states have introduced bills to this effect. Last week, the Republican-dominated Oklahoma State House passed a bill that prohibits the teaching of critical race theory. Idaho's governor just signed a bill banning critical race theory in schools. Also last week, during debate about a bill that would ban schools from teaching, quote, divisive concepts about race and sex, one Louisiana Republican said, and I quote, "If you were having a discussion on whatever the case may be on slavery, then you can talk about everything dealing with slavery, the good, the bad, the ugly." Before he was reminded there was no good to slavery and walked it back. During a similar debate today, a Republican member of the Tennessee state legislature gave an unwitting lesson in the importance of accurately and rigorously teaching the real history of slavery and racial oppression in the United States.
The 3/5 Compromise was a direct effort to ensure that southern states never got the population necessary to continue the practice of slavery everywhere else in the country. What does that mean? Appropriation based on population. That's how we pick. Everybody in here knows we've got 9, I hope I'm right, 9 state representatives representatives. By limiting the number of population in the count, they specifically limited the number of representatives that would be available in the slaveholding states, and they did it for the purpose of ending slavery well before Abraham Lincoln, well before a civil war. Do we talk about that? I don't hear that anywhere in this conversation across the country.
I mean, look, it's a complicated history, the Three-Fifths Compromise. It's true that a bunch of folks on the other side of the compromise were trying to limit the representational power of the slave states. But it's also unquestionably like a moral stain on the Constitution that explicitly said slaves counted less than any other person. In fact, didn't even use the word slave, which was an indicator at the time that everyone then knew enough to be morally embarrassed by what they were doing. This fight against teaching America's racist past has now been integrated into the broader Republican cancel culture wokeness moral panic being stoked with Joe Biden in office. And since he's a less appealing target than other recent Democratic presidents for, who knows what reason, Mitch McConnell and his party decided the biggest threat to America is white people finding out America's institutions are racist. Last time we visited the Tennessee State House, it was to speak to State Representative London Lamar about the Republican push to keep a bust of one of the founders of the KKK in the state rotunda. She joined us from in front of that bust. She's back tonight after having debated Tennessee's proposed law banning critical race theory. State Representative London Lamar, welcome to you. My understanding, Representative, is that you were on the floor for this debate, and I'm just curious what it was like to be in that room, what that debate was like, your reaction to your colleagues' monologue on the Three-Fifths Compromise.
It was a very intense conversation because it's uncomfortable for Republicans to talk about race. And in their attempt to not be held accountable for the historical implications of racism in this country is just unfathomable. I spoke on the floor today because the House sponsor said in his debates on this bill that an anonymous young white girl felt trauma because she felt like an oppressor based on the history of white America and what we've done regarding slavery. And while I don't want any child to feel any sort of trauma, I took this opportunity to bring to light the trauma that Black people feel living in America. Black children grow up knowing their whole American history, that the majority of the American history that we live today is of Black people being slaves. Or that more recently, our grandparents' whole lives were living through the Civil Rights Movement, where they had to drink from colored water fountains, where they couldn't vote.
Pause it right there, Shakita. Pause it right there. All right, everybody watching on Facebook, the African History Network on Facebook, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. We're going to keep broadcasting there. We're out of time here on 910 a.m., the Superstation WFDF. If you'd like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, and paypal.me/the AHN Show through PayPal. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can support us there and register for my online course on Saturdays, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. We'll be back tomorrow. Look out for my interview, 3 p.m. on Thursday with Dr. Daryl Scott. Remember, right now is correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. All right, stand by. All right, let's keep going. Let me cue up this clip here. All right, Don and who we have, Don Dada. How you doing, Don Dada? Also, Barry Young. Also, thanks for your donation, Barry. Thanks for the support. We really appreciate that. Just a second here. Let me cue this clip up. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. On 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF here in Detroit. I do radio here in Detroit. Radio talk show host, been on 9:10 a.m. WFDF for 5 years. And then we also broadcast at the same time on Facebook, on our social media platforms. And then we're here Sundays. I'm on 9:10 a.m. I do radio 6 days a week. I'm on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well. And we broadcast on our social media platforms then as well. All right, so stand by. Let me cue this clip up here. This is from All In with Chris Hayes. This is All In with Chris Hayes from May 4th, 2021. And he's talking about what happened at the Tennessee State Legislature and State Representative Justin Lafferty totally misstating what the Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787 was, okay? and he's speaking with state representative from Tennessee, State Representative London Lamar, Democrat from Tennessee, who had some criticisms of Republicans in the state legislature. Okay, let's go back to this clip.
Law banning critical race theory. State Representative London Lamar, welcome to you. My understanding, Representative, is that you were on the floor for this debate, and I'm just curious what it was like to be in that room, what that debate was like, your reaction to your colleagues' monologue on the 3/5 compromise.
It was a very intense conversation because it's uncomfortable for Republicans to talk about race. And in their attempt to not be held accountable for the historical implications of racism in this country is just unfathomable. I spoke on the floor today because the House sponsor said in his debates on this bill that an anonymous young white girl felt trauma because she felt like an oppressor based on the history of white America and what we've done regarding slavery. And while I don't want any child to feel any sort of trauma, I took this opportunity to bring to light the trauma that Black people feel living in America. Black children grow up knowing their whole American history, that the majority of the American history that we live today is of Black people being slaves. Or that more recently, our grandparents' whole lives were living through the civil rights movement, where they had to drink from colored water fountains, where they couldn't vote, where they were being lynched, where they were being killed, where they were being denied housing, food, and other basic necessities. And most importantly, our whole criminal justice system in America was built on the oppression and the systematic criminalization of Black people. So no, we can't just scapegoat or whitewash history so those white Americans now don't have to feel the repercussions of 400 plus years of enslavement and what that's done to a disadvantaged population such as mine. What we have to do is have these conversations in educational settings to bring context to our students so that we can remember what happened in American history so we won't repeat the horrible things that happened in American history. And my colleagues' comments today brings light to the fact that we need to continue to teach about the history of America regarding racism, because he was actually incorrect. The 3/5 compromise was created so that Southern states can have more representation in Congress. So they counted 3 per 5 slaves. They counted them as 3 persons. So we obviously need to continue to talk about race because the Republicans are not even clear on what the issues of the 3/5 compromise or other racism issues in America are. And they had the audacity to clap for it, and it was wrong. So we have a problem here. And the fact that we're trying to change laws in order to not have a conversation about race is just wrong and is downright offensive.
One thing that I'm having a hard time with this, I was going through a little bit of the bill language today. So, I've seen examples of different, some text in critical race theory that has characterizations that I think are poorly worded or maybe oversimplified, like anything, right? But I don't even get the category. Like, if you're going to say we're not going to do this thing, what is the category of the thing? Critical race theory is an extremely amorphous term that's been used in all kinds of ways. Like, do you have an understanding of what it would actually mean for what curricula, what lessons can or can't be taught in your state schools?
As they say, they don't even know what critical race theory is. They don't even have a clear understanding of what that actually looks like. Right now, these standards are put in place based on members that the governor appoints. So we already have a partisan governor, which can put in members who are already partisan to decide the standards that are taught in our children's education. Now, he referenced standards such as teaching about Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and Diane Nash. And there are important stories to tell, but they are not putting in place standards that allow us to talk about the full context of why these particular issues are going on. They want these conversations to be limited, very surface level, and will not allow teachers to go to in-depth conversations. And I brought this issue up is that the fact that teachers who actually lived through the civil rights movement will be limited to talk about their lived experiences. people like my grandmother, who I stay with now and look at every day, had to drink from a colored water fountain. She was discriminated against, such as many Americans who are still living to this day. And so to limit educators and people's ability in our education system to have conversations about race when we are still living in a society that I would say it still has systemic racial implications going on in laws is problematic. So using the word critical race theory and all of these other acronyms, if they don't even understand themselves, is to me a opportunity for them not to be held accountable to the history of what white America has done to Black people. And no, we're not trying to make you be oppressor. We're not trying to call you oppressor, as the sponsor said, and we're not trying to act as victims. What we truly want is to look at what has happened in history, right, make it better so that we can move forward.
All right. That's State Representative London Lamar, Democrat from Tennessee. We need more sisters like that, brothers and sisters. And there are a lot of them like that, but we just need more. Okay. That sister is correct. Okay. That sister is correct. Now, quick clarification on the 3/5 compromise of 1787. See, we need to see the state legislature. I cannot stress this enough. And when I did my Facebook post on this article, I said that. I said this. I cannot stress enough how important the state legislatures are, because because power over education is largely at the state level, not the federal level. Okay, this is what a lot of people don't understand. And there was an article from let me see. So I posted this one today. There was an article from Debut. I think I posted an article on Tuesday about the same topic, but it was a different article. And I talked about the impact that the state legislature has and the control that the state legislature has over education and educational standards and the curriculum, et cetera. Okay. All right. So check out this other article here. Now, I reference it a lot. Yeah, there was an article from rawstory.com. Tennessee Republican defends counting slaves as 3/5 of a person in floor speech. And I said, I cannot stress enough how dangerous it is to have idiots like this in elected office who are ignorant of history. Okay, this is what I said when I posted this article. I cannot stress enough how dangerous it is to have idiots like this in elected office. And let me see, can we pull up this? See, we pull up this post here. How dangerous it is to have idiots like this in elected office who are ignorant of history. Okay, and this was an article from rawstory.com as well for March 4th, 2021, for May 4th, I should say, May 4th, 2021, from rawstory.com. Now, there's an article from theroot.com from a few years ago by Dr. Paul Finkelman, who's a history professor, author of about 50 books. I interviewed Dr. Paul Finkelman a couple years ago when he was speaking here at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. Okay. And he's written an excellent article dealing with the 3/5 compromise of 1787, because a lot of people don't fully understand the 3/5 compromise. It's Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Name of this article is the 3/5 compromise, why its taint persists. The 3/5 compromise, why its taint persists. This is from February 26, 2013 for theroot.com. Not a big fan of the Root, but they do have some good articles here and there. And basically, the 3/5 compromise, you can read through, but is dealing with apportionment and taxation, and is dealing with how do you determine how many seats in the House of Representatives slave-holding states will have? Okay, how do you determine how many seats in the U.S. House of Representatives slave-holding states will have? Now, this was a debate that took place at the Philadelphia Convention in 1787. And the southern states want the full population of their slaves counted, okay? Where you have northern states who are saying, if you count the full population, then this is going to give the southern slaveholding states an unfair advantage in the House of Representatives and the Electoral College. Why is this? Because representation in the House of Representatives, how many seats a state has in the House of Representatives, is based upon their population. Okay? Well, the southern states want the full population of enslaved Africans counted in their respective states. Northern states are saying, well, how do you want the full population counted? You don't even want to recognize they're human. So they're going back and forth trying to come up with this formula. Some people are saying count half of the population of enslaved Africans. Some are saying count 3/4. So decide to count 3/5 of the population. It's not saying it was not saying they're 3/5 of a human being. That's a misunderstanding. They're counting 3/5 of the total population per state, okay, for the purpose of apportionment. So, for instance, hypothetically, and I think he has that here in the article, but if you read the U.S. Constitution, and you can go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website, or archives.gov, and you can read the U.S. Constitution there. Okay, so he lays it out. Thus, this was a provision that was not directly about race, but about status and the allocation of political power. Free blacks were counted in exactly the same way as whites. Now, this is what a lot of people don't understand. The free African American population in various states, including various southern states, their full population was counted. 3/5 of the free African American population was not counted. Their full population was counted. The clause did not say that a slave was 3/5 of a person. The clause said nothing about free blacks who were treated by the clause exactly as free whites. Okay. Rather, the clause provided a mathematical formula that allowed for allocation of representatives in Congress that factored in the slave population. No slaves could vote in the country, although free blacks could vote in a number of states. Now, up until we talked about this last week, up until about 1750, I think Georgia was the last state, but going into the early 1700s, in various colonies, this is even before the American Revolutionary War, in various colonies, free African Americans could vote. Okay, that's going to be the last state or colony that allowed free African Americans to vote was, let's see, Virginia. I think it was Georgia around 1750 or something like that. If you read chapter 2 Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., he lays this out in chapter 2. Let me see here. But he lays this out in chapter 2, somewhere between pages 36 and 40. I have to find it again. Okay, so the way all this history evolves is different than the way we think it evolves. The way this history actually evolves is different than the way we think it evolves. Let me see here. And if we go back and look in milestones in history in the back of the book, let's see, Stonewall Rebellion, 1739. And we know that codified slave laws in 1619 don't exist in the 13 colonies. The first colony to have codified slave laws is going to be Massachusetts in 1641. They come to Virginia about 1660, 1661. So slavery is evolving. And then we know that The chattel slavery, that's going to evolve in the 1660s in the different colonies, starting with Maryland and Virginia, and it's going to spread to the other colonies. So the way this history evolves is not the way we think it happened. Okay, page 45, 6th edition of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. Virginia and Maryland led the way, enacting laws in the 1660s that forbade intermarriage and made black slaves for life. Under the new dispensation, which was adopted with minor modifications by other colonies, children born of African women were ruled bond or free, according to the status of the mother. These are some of the things that we deal with in the online course that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history also. Let's see here. Okay. But yeah, going into the early 1700s, in the various colonies, free African Americans could still vote. There was okay, here we go. Yeah, this page 38. Page 38. And I think I have let me see. I think I have it bookmarked. I think I have, did I do I think I have a graphic of it. Let me see. I have a graphic of Before the Mayflower. Okay, that's dealing with page 40. All right, but anyway, thought I did another graphic of this one. But anyway, page 38. Page 38. He talks about additional evidence of the relatively high status of the first American blacks is to be found in colonial documents, which indicate that they voted and participated in public life. It was not until 1723, in fact, that blacks were denied the right to vote in Virginia. 1723. He's talking about free African Americans. According to Albert E. McKinley, blacks voted in South Carolina until 1701, in North Carolina until 1715, and in Georgia until 1754. I was close. I was thinking 1750 in Georgia. Not only did pioneer blacks vote, but they also held public office. There were some public offices that they held, some small public offices that they held as well. Okay. So like I've said before, the way this whole history evolves is the way it actually evolved is different than how we think it happened. Okay. The way this history actually evolved is different than how we think it happened. That's why the real history has to be taught. Okay, and Before the Mayflower is a good source. You read chapter 2, it'll blow your mind. This is one of the books I use in the online course. You don't have to buy any of the books to follow along in class. We have book references and things like this, and I show you a lot of the information. It's a visual class. I do a PowerPoint presentation, etc. But some books you may have on your shelf. If you have Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. on your shelf, pull that book out and read chapter 2. Chapter 2 will blow your mind. Okay. I just posted the link here also for the online course that I teach. You can register for that. As soon as you register, you can start watching the content. Class meets again Saturday, May 8th, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. It's class number 2. It's a 9-week online course, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, let's continue. How's everybody doing? Okay, so we're talking about the 3/5 Compromise of 1787 quickly here. Then I want to get to the story then with Vernon Jones and have to get out of here. I have a lot of work to do. So there's a misunderstanding about the Three-Fifths Compromise, 1787 also. It was not saying that we would count as 3/5 of a person or 3/5 of a human being. That's not what it's saying. It's saying for the purpose of apportionment and taxation, okay, 3/5 of the population of those in bondage is going to be counted. Now, this also ties into the and he goes into a lot of history in this article. The origin of the clause illustrates the complexity of the issue under the Articles of Confederation, which existed before the U.S. Constitution. Each state had a single vote in the National Congress in 1787 on the eve of the Constitutional Convention. This meant that Virginia, with about 690,000 people, and Pennsylvania, with about 430,000 people, had the same number of votes in Congress as Delaware, with a population under 60,000, and Rhode Island with a population under 65,000. One of the goals of James Madison and other framers of the U.S. Constitution was to replace this utterly undemocratic system of representation with representation in a new Congress based on population. So, based upon the U.S. Constitution, when it comes to the U.S. Senate, every state has 2 U.S. senators. Okay, originally, U.S. senators were not voted on by the public. Originally, U.S. senators were appointed by the state legislature. They were appointed to a 10-year term originally. For about the first 124 years, people did not vote for U.S. senators. It's not until about 1914 that people started voting for U.S. senators. Prior to that, U.S. senators were appointed by the state legislature. And one of the reasons why was because the position of a U.S. senator was so important and so sensitive, because U.S. senators vote on removing a president from office through the impeachment trial, through the impeachment process. So they wanted U.S. senators to be insulated from public pressure and political pressure. So they didn't want to have to deal with them having to run for re-election and trying to get votes from the public. Okay, so they had them insulated from this. And for the first about 124 years, U.S. senators were appointed by members of the state legislature. All right, now, so read the rest of this article here, because a lot of people misunderstand the Three-Fifths Compromise, 1787. The other thing is that the Three-Fifths Compromise, the way the count was taken to determine representation in the House of Representatives, that is corrected by Section 2 of the 14th Amendment of 1868. So if you read, when you read the U.S. Constitution, it talks, and usually when it talks about the Three-Fifths Compromise, it has an asterisk there, and it'll say see Section 2 of the 14th Amendment, because the way the count was taken was corrected by Section 2 of the 14th Amendment. But now, representation in the House of Representatives, we know that also then plays into the Electoral College, because what determines how many Electoral College votes a particular state has, you take the number of seats in the House of Representatives a state has, you add to that the number of U.S. senators a state has. Every state has 2 U.S. senators. And then you take the number of members of the House of Representatives a state has. That tells you how many Electoral College votes a state has. So slaveholding states would have an advantage in the U.S. House of Representatives, because a lot of northern states had a larger overall population of free people, and some northern states in 1787 had already abolished slavery, or they were about to. Vermont was the first state to abolish slavery, July 2nd, 1777. You're going to have Massachusetts, you're going to have Connecticut. In Philadelphia, you have Pennsylvania, you have the Pennsylvania Gradual Abolition Act of 1787. So you're going to have 5 states in 1787 that have already abolished slavery. Either they abolished slavery altogether, which meant they didn't have slavery at all in the colony or state, or they abolished the international transatlantic slave trade, which meant bringing Africans into that state as to enslave them. Okay, and you're going to have some northern states there in the process, or they're going to start phasing this out. So many northern states had a larger overall population, even northern states that still had slaves. they had a larger population of free people plus slaves, whereas some southern states had a larger population overall because some southern states had more slaves than free people. Some had more slaves than white people. So this gave, when you count 3/5 of the slave population, since the majority of the slaves are going to be in these southern states, this gives the southern states a advantage in the House of Representatives. And then it gives them an advantage also in the Electoral College as well. So this is this debate taking place at the Philadelphia Convention. And then if you look at Virginia, you're going to have a change because of the presidential election of 1800, where Thomas Jefferson wins because of the Electoral College votes associated with Virginia. Virginia was the biggest slaveholding state at the time. If we very quickly here, if we look at this, eventually the Constitutional Convention would only partially achieve this admirable goal. Okay, so one of the goals of James Madison and the other framers was to replace this utterly undemocratic system from the Articles of the Confederation of representation with representation in a new Congress based on population. Let me see here. He talks about Virginia. If only free. Okay, but in the House of Representatives, the framers provided for representation based on population. The great quandary was how to determine a state's population for allocating representation in Congress. If only free people were counted, then the northern states would have dominated the Congress. In 1790, Virginia, for example, had a population of more than 690,000 people, but 288,000 of them were slaves. Thus, the state's free population was only about 404,000. On the other hand, Pennsylvania had a total population of 434,000, and all but 4,000 of these people were free. So Pennsylvania had a population of 434,000, which was larger than the free population of Virginia. Pennsylvania only had 4,000 slaves in 1787. Okay, 1790, about 1790 he's looking at. Pennsylvania was in the process of ending slavery, and by 1790, a majority of the state's black population was free, and those free blacks could vote on the same basis as whites. Okay, 1790. Pennsylvania was in the process of ending slavery, and by 1790, a majority of the state's black population was free, and those free blacks could vote on the same basis as free whites. Thus, if representation in Congress were based only on the free population, then Pennsylvania would be able to outvote Virginia. If slaves were counted in allocation, if slaves were counted in allocating representation, then Virginia would be the most powerful state in the nation with the largest congressional delegation, because you're counting the free population of Virginia, which was 404,000, and you're counting 3/5 of their 288,000 slaves, okay, for representation in the House of Representatives. So this is the argument that's taking place at the Philadelphia Convention. This is one of the arguments, not the only argument. This is one of the arguments that's taking place at the Philadelphia Convention in 1787. Okay, so read this extensive article here from theroot.com by Dr. Paul Finkelman. And I've interviewed Dr. Paul Finkelman before also. If you Google my name and his name, it'll come up with the interview that we did. And I asked him to go through and explain the Three-Fifths Compromise, because a lot of people misunderstand the Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787. Okay, so check that out. All right, now, it's a deep history. Okay, all right. So let's see. Okay, so we dealt with Tennessee, and read the article from the Washington Post and also Raw Story dealing with a GOP state lawmaker in a Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787. GOP state lawmakers, the 3/5 compromise was actually good. Okay, read that article. It's from Washington Post, and you can just Google State Representative Lafferty, State Representative Justin Lafferty. You can just Google him, and it'll come up with the information on that. And in the article here, just to see, once again, it's dangerous when you have people in elected positions who are ignorant of history, especially state legislatures and U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate. And this is something that Dr. Ray Winbush, my friend Dr. Ray Winbush, said on Roland Martin Unfiltered when they talked about it was the day after the hearing day after H.R. 40 was voted out of the House Judiciary Committee. Okay, that happened in March. It was April or March. I think it was March when it was voted out of the House Judiciary Committee. Because I interviewed Cam Howard, national co-chair of NCOBRA. I interviewed him on my show. You can go check out that interview. But Dr. Ray Winbush said that he could not believe how ignorant some Republicans were about history. Okay, because he was there at the hearing. Okay, that was April. I interviewed Cam Howard April 11th, 2021. Dr. Ray Winbush said that he attended the hearing in the House Judiciary Committee. It happened in mid-April. And he said he could not believe how ignorant some Republicans were of history who were members of the House Judiciary Committee. I said, I can believe how ignorant they are of history because I listen to them every day. Jim Jordan of Ohio, I listen to them every day. This is what I'm saying. It's dangerous when you have people like this in elected office who are voting on bills that impact every aspect of our lives and they're ignorant of history. That's dangerous. Okay, how you doing, Kabaka? Okay, brother, we'll see you in class. Everybody be sure to register for my online class that I teach on Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we just had a new session that just started up. So class number 2 is Saturday, May 8th, 2021. And I've had people ask me, okay, so some people say, well, I'm at work that time. We do the class live. All the classes are recorded. All the classes are recorded and they're archived. So you can go back and watch it when you get off work or what have you. And even after the course ends, you'll still have access to the content. All right. So we'll post a link here again. And it's a 9-week online course that I teach. You can watch from around the world. You can see me. I can't see you. So you don't have to worry about doing your hair, putting on makeup, anything like that. You can be in your pajamas. And you can ask questions during the class. We have a live text chat. Okay. You can see me. I can't see you. We also have the information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. So in this article here, this is something I want to hone in on. GOP state lawmakers, the 3/5 compromise was actually good. This is from May 4th, 2021. Okay, Washington Post, written by Aaron Blake. Republican lawmakers across the country are moving to restrict teaching about systemic racism in our education system, targeting critical race theory. Most of them can't tell you what critical race theory is. But in the course of doing so, some are attempting to rewrite a very pertinent part of history. Okay, so they're talking about revisionist history while they're trying to rewrite history. They're not trying to correct history. They're promoting revisionist history while criticizing revisionist history. Okay. This article here, I didn't have it up on the screen share. GOP state lawmakers, the 3/5 compromise was actually good. It's from May 4th, 2021, written by Aaron Blake for the Washington Post. Twice in recent weeks, Republican state lawmakers have defended the infamous 3/5 compromise, the constitutional agreement by which enslaved people would count as, he misrepresented, well, the counting not 3/5 of a person for representation purposes, but they're counting 3/5 of the population of the enslaved population, 3/5 of the population of enslaved Africans, by arguing that it was actually good somehow, by arguing that it was actually somehow anti-slavery. Okay, you've had Republican state lawmakers arguing that the 3/5 compromise was good by arguing that it was actually somehow anti-slavery. It wasn't anti-slavery. It gave the South an advantage and an incentive to maintain slavery. Now, it did not give them as much power as they wanted in the House of Representatives and Electoral College, because Southern states wanted the full population of enslaved Africans counted. Okay, so it reduced their dominance, but it still gave them a dominance in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. The 3/5 compromise was a direct effort to ensure that Southern states never got the population necessary to continue the practice of slavery everywhere else in the country, Tennessee State Representative Justin Lafferty claimed Tuesday. Lafferty added by limiting the number of population in the count, they specifically limit the number of representatives that would be available in the slave-holding states, and they did it for the purpose of ending slavery. Well before Abraham Lincoln, you heard him. It arrested the overwhelming dominance that slave-holding states would have in the House of Representatives and Electoral College, but they still had an overwhelming dominance in the House of Representatives and Electoral College. It just didn't give them as much as they wanted. But it wasn't done for the purpose of ending slavery. In fact, if he looked closely, he would have seen a version of his claim during a similar debate in Colorado a few weeks ago. In that one, State Representative Ron Hanks, Republican, claimed that the 3/5 compromise was an effort by non-slave states to reduce the amount of representation the slave states had. It was not impugning anybody's humanity. So read the rest of this article here. Okay, this is from Washington Post. Now, lastly, we'll post this link here. Lastly, I want to look at what happened on the Black News Channel, Marc Lamont Hill's show. Marc Lamont Hill interviewed Vernon Jones. Okay, now Vernon Jones is former state representative in Georgia. Okay, he was a Democrat. He's a Trump loving black man. He switched to the Republican Party. Now he's running for governor of Georgia. Now he's going to get his behind spanked by Stacey Abrams. Okay. Now, Vernon Jones said if he becomes governor of Georgia, he said that he's going to do an executive order to ban critical race theory. But there was a little problem here that old Vernon had. When asked, please explain to me what critical race theory is, Vernon starts talking about Christopher Columbus. Vernon Jordan couldn't explain what critical race theory was. But you want to ban it. See, Vernon is catering to white conservatives. Okay? He can't explain what critical race theory is. All right, now, critical race theory is a legal analysis on the premise that race is a social construct that is used to oppress people of color rather than a natural biological feature. Now, there's no widespread effort to teach critical race theory in schools either. It's just white people are scared of critical race theory. Critical race theory is a legal analysis on the premise that race is a social construct that is used to oppress people of color rather than a natural biological feature. All right. So I want to go to what happened here because, see, with a lot of these conservatives, when you start asking them to define what it is that you're talking about, they can't tell you what it is they're talking about. They're just playing on people's fears. Okay, let's go to this clip.
Republican-controlled states are pushing back against the use of critical race theory in public schools. As a response to the murder of George Floyd and the nationwide protests it sparked, many schools across the nation have adopted diversity and inclusion trainings, as well as incorporated anti-racism pedagogy as part of the curriculum. But there has been a recent backlash in red states calling to ban critical race theory in schools. The theory is deemed as un-American, vilified as the left's hidden agenda to corrupt the nation and to instill feelings of guilt in white students. 3 days ago, Idaho governor signed a bill into law banning the theory in schools. Similar bills have recently passed the Texas and Oklahoma legislatures and are currently sitting on their governor's desks. And Tennessee is expected to pass a similar ban later this week. Kurt Cox, who is running for the governor of Virginia, tweeted on April 26th, "It's time to put a stop to the left-wing takeover of public education in Virginia." He then laid out his 7-point plan, which includes prohibit the teaching of critical race theory, eliminate its use as part of teacher evaluations, and restore race-blind, merit-based admission to Virginia's governor schools. And finally, yesterday, the gubernatorial candidate for Georgia, Vernon Jones, tweeted, and I quote, "On day one, through executive order, I will immediately instruct the Georgia Department of Education to prohibit the teaching of critical race theory within our public schools. It's time for our schools to stop teaching our kids to hate America." The man behind that tweet, Vernon Jones, he is here with me right now on Black News Tonight to have a wonderful conversation. Brother Jones, so good to see you. I want to start off, and we have plenty of time, so I want to make sure we flesh all this out. I have just a couple of questions, just clarifying questions, so I understand where you stand. You want to completely ban critical race theory in Georgia public schools. Is that accurate?
That is accurate because of the contents of it. I think that it clearly needs to be reevaluated. What it is doing is just creating an environment that is hostile towards one race or another. And I don't think we should be in that posture. I think there's a way that we can strike a balance where no child is feeling like, hey, because of my race, I'm paying for something I had nothing to do with. So that's all. I just think it needs to be redone, revamped, and amended.
Okay. What is critical race theory?
Well, actually, I think it's different depending on who's teaching it and how they're teaching it. I think you can agree with that. We were taught that Christopher Columbus discovered America. Well, you and I both know that Christopher Columbus got lost. People are already living here. But there are those who are using their own ideology and their own party affiliation to go to the extreme. And that's all I'm trying to address here.
But what does that have to do with critical race theory? Let me pause for a second. I'm trying to understand, though. You oppose critical race theory, which I understand. I'm just asking, what is it? What is the thing you define it? Like, for example, if I said I'm against creationism, I would say creationism is X, Y, and Z, right? If I said I was against the teaching of sex education, I said, well, sex education is X, Y, and Z, and I'd have a basis for it. What is critical race theory?
Well, first of all, again, I can tell you, but it's left up to you to understand. I can't make you understand. Fact of it is, the critical race theory, even on its basis, should not be taught in our schools, period. Now, if you can't understand,
but what is it?
If you want to debate, well, to me, what it does, to me, my interpretation, as well as many others.
No, not what it does. What is it? How do you define it? I mean, I just asked you to define critical race theory because my audience may not know.
Well,
say it
obviously
again.
You don't know, and you haven't. I said obviously you don't know, and you haven't told your audience. But again, how I see it, and how
I don't know.
Received. Well, then what is it then? No, what is it then? Okay,
well, I'm happy to answer that for you, but you're saying
just answer. I'll tell you what.
I will.
Okay, so let me pause it right here. See, Vernon Jones got back into a corner, and see, Vernon is running for governor of Georgia, trying to appeal to white conservatives. Vernon Jones said he would do an executive order if he becomes governor to ban critical race theory. But he can't explain what critical race theory is. He's appealing to white people. He does not know what critical race theory is. And he got exposed. Okay? And now he's trying to back out of it. Now he's trying to tell Marc Lamont Hill to explain what critical race theory is. Well, no, you said you're going to ban something that you can't define. Read this article here from BNC.TV, Black News Channel, BNC.TV. Rep. Vernon Jones wants to ban critical race theory, can't define what it is. Critical race theory is a legal analysis on the premise that race is a social construct that is used to oppress people of color rather than a natural biological feature. There's no widespread effort to teach critical race theory in school. Okay, there's no widespread effort to do that. They're just using, Republicans, conservatives are using this as a lightning rod to scare white people, to galvanize support around being against critical race theory, being against the 1619 Project. So they're using these different buzzwords as a lightning rod because they don't really have a real platform to push. They don't have a real platform to push of policies that are beneficial to people. So they're using these different cultural issues to push. I'm going to go back to this clip here.
You don't know. And you haven't, I said, obviously you don't know and you haven't told your audience. But again, how I see it and how
I don't know.
Received. Well, then what is it then? No, what is it then? Okay,
well, I'm happy to answer that for you. But you're saying
just answer. I'll tell you what. Just
I will.
Let's
absolutely.
Not get into debate. Okay, I'm waiting for you to answer. Go ahead and answer.
I will. Just hold on one second.
Just answer.
You're saying that on day one.
Answer the question first. You answer the first question.
I promise I'll answer your question.
Well, I want you to answer before you move on.
That's fine.
What is it?
So
I think
so now
you can't tell your audience what it is.
So hold on a second. So now
saying,
Vernon Jones is trying to interview Dr. Marc Lamont Hill. So now Vernon, see, this is what happens. See, this is why I've been doing radio 11 years. I know when I'm talking to somebody who calls in with talking points they don't understand, and they want me to explain to them their talking points. Vernon Jones is trying to pivot because he's backed into a corner. Now he wants Dr. Marc Lamont Hill to explain critical race theory, but Vernon Jones came on the show to explain why he's going to ban critical race theory if he becomes governor, but he can't explain to you exactly what it is. So now he wants to pivot and put the onus on Dr. Marc Lamont Hill to explain Vernon Jones' own point. Because he has no clue what critical race theory is. Just like a lot of Republicans can't tell you what critical race theory is. Let's go back to this clip.
In order, you tell me you can't tell your audience.
In order for us to have a conversation, we can't talk over each other, brother. I'm happy to answer your question, but I want to finish my question on my show. So what I'm saying is, on day one, you've made a statement that on day one, you're going to have an executive order to ban something, and you have yet to define what the thing is you're going to ban. I'm happy to answer it. I happen to have expertise in this area, but I would think because you are going to make you're going to make as an executive order a ban of something. I would think that you would have a definition of it. You told me what it does. You mentioned Christopher Columbus, which has nothing to do with critical race theory. Critical race theory. You asked me to answer your question. There's plenty of time. We can go 3 segments. We got all night, so we'll have all the time in the world, brother. I do want to answer.
I didn't ask you for an editorial. I asked you to answer, and you went through editorial. Now, let me say this. First of all,
so
I'm on your show.
So critical race theory.
I didn't ask to be on your show. Let's be clear. Now, I'll let you talk and allow me to talk. You dial into me and ask me
but you have to answer
on
the
your
question.
show. You're not correct. So don't pull that card that this is your show because I got drafted. I didn't try for your team. You asked me to come on your show, so let's be clear about it. Effectively, you have not answered what is the critical race theory because no matter what I said, I told you I was banning it. That's it. Now you tell me what it is. Tell me, since you're the expert.
Sure.
Because you be so-called experts. Did you write?
So let me just pause it right here. See, this is a trick that Republicans use. Okay, he's trying to flip the onus onto Dr. Marc Lamont Hill to explain what Vernon Jones is against. Why would you do an executive order to ban something that you can't explain what it is? Vernon Jones is running on the platform of banning critical race theory through executive order if he becomes governor. Why would you promise to ban something that you can't explain what it is? Let's go back to the clip.
So-called experts. Did you write it? Did you write it? Did you write it? You're the expert. Did you write it?
Okay. So
what makes you an expert? What makes you an expert?
What makes me an expert is that for the last 15 years, I've been a trained scholar with an Ivy League PhD who has written and studied race. What makes me an expert is that I have lectured widely around the world on critical race theory.
PhDs come a dime a dozen. So because you have a PhD, you're an expert. But what county?
No, I don't actually. Actually, a PhD does make you an expert.
I don't pull that PhD. Actually, sir, what it says is that you walk around like you got a PhD, but you know what? You're just as dumb as two left shoes because you're a PhD.
Whoa. We're not academic. Hold on, sir. Here's what we're not going to do.
Okay, so Vernon Jones pulled a Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. Because this is what Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson did when Dr. Umar Johnson and I were on the Tammy Mack Late Show. Vernon Jones started insulting us. Vernon Jones said racism doesn't exist, white supremacy doesn't exist, things like this. Then he started making personal attacks on us. This is what Vernon Jones did. Vernon Jones got back into the corner. He came on the show. He couldn't explain what critical race theory is, but he said he's going to ban it if he becomes governor. Then he kept getting pressed to explain what it is. So then he starts making personal attacks on Dr. Lamont Hill, who starts laying out his credentials. And then he starts trying to demean his credentials and saying you're just as dumb as other people and other stuff like that. Dr. Marc Lamont Hill, he didn't call Vernon Jones dumb or anything like that. Vernon Jones is dumb, but he didn't attack Vernon Jones. He's just trying to get him to explain, please define for me what it is that you want to ban. Let's go back to this. Because it starts going downhill, okay? It starts going downhill.
You're just as dumb as two left shoes because you're a PhD.
Whoa. We're not academic. Hold on, sir. Here's what we're not going to do. Here's what y'all got to mute his mic. Y'all got to mute his mic. Y'all got to mute his mic. This is what I'm saying. If you talk over me and call, we're not going to name call on the show. I have not name called you, sir. You have come on the show. You're a black Republican. I have not called you a name. I've not called you Uncle Tom. I've not called you a handkerchief head. I've not called you a Sambo. I've not called you a shine. I've not called you a ham bone. I haven't done any of that. So you're not going to come on my show and call me dumb. What I will tell you is that critical race theory is a theory that actually emerged out of critical legal studies. It is a theory that makes an attempt to understand the law through the lens of race, and it's founded on some fundamental presumptions. One is the intractability of race and racism, meaning that it's an intractable problem in America, and that we have to use the lens of race to make sense of things. It also is based on the use of counter stories. Listening to as Derek Bell, the critical race scholar, said, the voices at the bottom of the well to make sense of the world and to make sense of the law. These are two big theories, two big pillars of it. And so what we want to do, if you want to ban it, you have to explain to me why. But the problem is all these Republicans, all of these scholars, all of these Republicans, all of these non-scholars, they say, I'm going to ban critical race theory, and they can't answer it. And then he says, well, if you can't answer it, then you must not know what it is. It's on some like he who smelt it dealt it kind of logic. The fact of the matter is he can't define it because he don't know what it is. They look for things to ban to signal to white people, hey, I got your back. They ban things that aren't even an issue. There is no public school teacher in America who is attempting to put critical race theory in schools. Critical race theory isn't even taught in high school. It's not even really taught in college. It is taught in law school, and it is increasingly been taught in graduate school because it is a set of theories and understandings to make sense of our lived realities through the law and through everyday life. Those are the things we should be talking about. So if you want to be a black Republican, your first day in office as governor, which you ain't going to be because you ain't going to beat Stacey Abrams as a black Republican. You only in the line because the line is short. But if you want to do this, your first thing, not to ban bullying, not to try and do something against the violence of LGBT students, not to do something about the gap in resources. Instead, you're going to ban a theory that nobody's trying to bring in the first place. That is a smoke signal to white America and really to white racists.
All right. So Vernon Jones got a lesson. Read this article here from BNC.TV, blacknewschannel.tv. Rep. Rep. Vernon Jones wants to ban critical race theory. Can't define what it is. He couldn't he's up here appealing to white people, okay? Trump lovers. He's up here appealing to them, talking about he's going to ban critical race theory. There's no effort to teach critical race theory in schools, high schools, middle school, things like this. It's not even really taught at the college level, except graduate level. It's some taught in law schools. So they're trying to ban something that's not even an issue. So they're trying to gain support. See, it's these different culture wars, critical race theory, systemic racism, indoctrination, 1619 Project. Republicans trying to galvanize support around this. America's not a racist country. See the whole thing, a lot of this around America's not a racist country is attacking the 1619 Project, which centers the origins of this country around 1619 and around slavery. Well, Republicans don't want to deal with slavery. They don't want to deal with systemic racism. Okay? So when they say America's not a racist country, it's attacking the 1619 Project, and it's attacking the attempt to teach the history of slavery in schools. Okay? Because this is what, when you go look at, there's an article from USA Today. There's various, in various state legislatures, they are attacking the attempt to even more correctly teach the history of slavery. There was one from USA Today. I'm going to pull this up here. You've seen me talk about this before. And this deals with a number of states. Let's see. Which one is this here? Let me try to pull this up. But that's not it. Just 1 second. So there's one from the USA Today that deals with all of this. School. I think it's this one right here. Yeah. Let's look at this one. This is from February. I've talked about it before. All this is tied together. Republican state lawmakers want to punish schools that teach the 1619 Project. Now, this is from February 10th, 2021. Republican state lawmakers want to punish schools that teach the 1619 Project. This is from February 10th, 2021. Okay. Lawmakers in several state houses this year want to stop lesson plans that focus on the centrality of slavery to American history as represented in the New York Times 1619 Project, previewing new battles in states over control of civics education. Republican lawmakers in Arkansas, Iowa, Mississippi, Missouri, and South Dakota filed bills in January 2021 that, if enacted, would cut funding to K-12 schools and colleges that provide lessons derived from the award-winning project. The South Dakota bill has since been withdrawn. Some historians say the bills are part of a larger effort by Republicans, including former President, Traitor-in-Chief Donald Trump. He's still a traitor. Traitor-in-Chief Donald Trump, Benedict Donald. Some historians say the bills are part of a larger effort by Republicans, including Benedict Donald, to glorify a more white and patriarchal view of American history that downplays the ugly legacy of slavery and the contributions of African Americans, Native Americans, women, and others to the nation's founding. See, when they say America's not a racist country, it's trying to get away from the origins of this country and teaching the origins of this country and teaching the history of slavery. They're trying to get away from that. They want to deal with a revisionist history. See, they're saying, oh, you're trying to indoctrinate our students. You're trying to indoctrinate our children. We don't want to teach about systemic racism. Political battles have long been fought largely in education boards over how American students learn about everything from the U.S. Civil War to ethnic studies and health. But proposed legislation that would penalize schools for teaching curriculums based on the 1619 Project signals a new era of policy debate over civics education that may increasingly play out in state legislatures. This was February 10th, 2021. So we're seeing what's taking place now. The project, which was first published in the New York Times Magazine in 2019, and for which the creator Nicole Hannah Jones won the Pulitzer Prize for commentary, marked the 400th year anniversary of the arrival of the first known enslaved Africans in the British colonies. Even though African people have been here in this land we call the United States of America, go back at least 51,700 years ago. Okay, the Khoisan, who come from Southern Africa. We deal with all this in the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, this is one of the books that we use. You don't have to buy this, but read this article here from USA Today. This is one of the books that we use in the class, that I reference in the class, from Dr. David Imhotep, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, which deals with, this was our land stolen from us. African people have been in this land tens of thousands of years ago, before Native Americans came into existence. This does not mean the transatlantic slave trade did not happen. It means we were here in this land tens of thousands of years before the transatlantic slave trade happened. Okay. All right. So, read the article from the USA Today, and then that ties into the one we dealt with at the top of the show from CNN.com, and also the one from New York Times dealing with Moscow Mitch McConnell. McConnell sends letter to Education Secretary Miguel Cardona, Secretary of U.S. Department of Education. McConnell sends letter to Education Secretary demanding removal of the 1619 Project from federal grant programs. That's April 30th, 2021. See, this is, when Senator Tim Scott delivered that message on behalf of the GOP, America's not a racist country. See, that's it's so much loaded into that statement. That's directly dealing with the effort to stop what people want to teach in school, to more correctly teach about the history of slavery in school. It's attacking that and attacking the 1619 Project. And then, as I said before, the most important thing that he said was what he said after that statement. The next statement was, it's backwards to fight discrimination with different types of discrimination, and it's wrong to use our painful past to dishonestly shut down debates in the present. See, that dealing with policies like the $5 billion allocated for African American farmers and farmers of color and the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. Because Tim Scott was attacking that on Sunday, May 2nd on Face the Nation. We played that clip on yesterday's show. He was attacking the resources going to African American farmers and farmers of color because of 100 years of discrimination and racism against them. All right. If you like this type of information, be sure to register for the online course that I teach on Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. It's a 9-week course on Saturdays. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. If you visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, it's right on the homepage. Now, we do the classes live. All the classes are recorded. So you can go back and watch them over and over again if you miss any of the class or what have you. They're all archived. So when you scroll down, when you go to our website and scroll down the page, you'll see the information for our radio show. And we're on 6 days a week. You click here to listen to audio podcasts of our shows. Click here to read articles I've written. There's information here for the online course. Next class is Saturday, May 8th. Click here to enroll. As soon as you enroll, you can start watching the content. You can watch class from Saturday, May 1st. Class is regularly $130, on sale $80. All the sessions are archived, and then also you have access to the course that I did in February and March of 2021. So that was 10, ended up being 10 classes. You can watch that content as well, okay? And you can watch from around the world. Also, if you like this type of information, you want to support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, or through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. That helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air. We're here 6 days a week, 6 nights a week, 6 days a week. Helps us keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, stay on the air. And we're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. Sometimes we go over. We're on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF here in Detroit, and I broadcast on my social media platforms. And then we're also here Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well. Okay? And I'm on the radio 6 days a week. Download the iHeartRadio app. Download the iHeartRadio app. Search for 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. And then you can listen to all the radio shows live on 9:10 a.m. And then download on iHeartRadio. Also search for the African History Network show, because we have a page, we have a channel on iHeartRadio. They have about 300 of my podcasts there, and I'll be uploading podcasts all this week also. If you support us through Cash App, be sure to type in $ the AHN Show, SHOW, and it'll say Michael and show my picture there. All right, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And also email us at AHNshow at African History Network, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com if you want to advertise with the African History Network as well. All right, talk to you tomorrow. Peace. Digital Dandelion's Technical Solutions works with businesses like yours to create an operations manual for your business, which is something many businesses don't have. According to AARP, more than 30% of small business owners are over 50 years old. Many business owners want to retire by selling their businesses or by passing their businesses on to their children. However, according to Forbes Investment Advisors, many retiring owners' attempts to sell their businesses for retirement fail. You cannot sell your business without a business manual. Your children also cannot inherit your business because there is no way to run it. Your business does not have to die when you leave. Their business Bible products will give you the tools you need for a thriving business that can make you money even after you retire. Are you looking at increasing your business's annual revenue? Digital Dandelions can help you make at least $100,000 in annual revenue and expand your business. Speak with them today about solidifying your business. Visit digitaldandelions.com today and get a free 30-minute consultation.
Are you getting ready for fall or winter? We have the solution for all seasonal clothing needs. Kemeticwear.com is the go-to online source for Kemetic African fashion and lifestyle products with a contemporary twist. We're committed to offering unique styles reflecting our African heritage.